This is my very off the cuff, based on emotion reaction to the Pulitzer Prize winners. This has virtually nothing to do with sort of any research. Good morning, and welcome back to Noteworthy Fiction. My name is Nicole, and I'm glad you're joining me. Thank you for watching my video. I'm still pretty new here on YouTube, but I'm glad to be sharing books with you. So today I am going to start a little Pulitzer Prize Winner Project. Oh, that was very alliterative. I have read quite a few in the past, and I'll talk about that in another video. But I have noticed that of recent, some of the books that I have purchased and then unhauled without making it through the first chapter or so have been Pulitzer Prize winners. And so I thought it would be fun to sit down and do a little reading vlog and see if I can figure out why that is. So what I've done is I've collected all the Pulitzer Prize winners that I currently have physical copies of. And I'm going to spend the day trying a chapter of each one and see how I like them. See if I want to continue reading them, see if I feel like unhauling them, and see if I can figure out what the connection is between the two. So I have here in front of me 11 Pulitzer Prize winners, ranging at quite a time span, as I discovered. So I've put them as much as I could recall, because the stack fell over a couple of times and definitely got unorganized. But I have put them as close as I can tell to the order in which they have won the Pulitzer Prize. So from oldest to most recent winners. None of these books I bought because they won Pulitzer Prizes. I bought them for various reasons. Either they were recommended or I just thought they sounded interesting. I purchased them over time and, wanted to read them just because of the recommendation or just, I saw the book and it sounded interesting. So starting with the oldest Pulitzer Prize winner that I have on my shelf, All the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren. A Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy Toole. The Color Purple by Alice Walker. Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. This is actually a reread for me. I have read this before. The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. Gilead by Marilynne Robinson. I have to look at her name every single time. I have no idea why. March by Geraldine Brooks. The Overstory by Richard Powers. And the last book that I personally own that has won a Pulitzer Prize, The Night Watchman by Louise Erdrich. Those are the books that I own, and my goal is to try a chapter of each of them and see how I like them. One of the things that I noticed in just looking at the time period of when these books were written and which ones I was most excited about is that I noticed does seem to be related to the time period. I'm going to predict now that what is going on is that there is a certain time period in the Pulitzer Prize awards that I really like, in that there may be a time period before and after that where the books aren't my favorite. Uh, and I have some guesses as to why that might be. So it'll be interesting, because what I'm hoping I'll find out is that if I can narrow it down to a time period in which I do like the Pulitzer Prize winners, then I'll have more books that I know that I can, go out and buy or borrow from the library and will enjoy. Because I do have to admit that right now I'm at the point where if I see a book has won the Pulitzer Prize winner, I'm more likely to not buy it. This has nothing to do with the Pulitzer Prize winner itself or prize awards for books. I think that's great. I think it's a great way to get books known and that kind of thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with the Pulitzer Prize as far as I've seen. I haven't done any particular research on it. I think that a lot of what is going on is that they're picking books in a particular style and perhaps genre that just isn't my favorite. I'm going to start by going from the oldest Pulitzer Prize winners to the most recent, and see if I can find a sweet spot. I'm going to start with my first two. So that would be All the King's Men and A Confederacy of Dunces. And I'm just going to read a chapter of each. In this video, all I'm attempting to do is see if there are any of these books that I can just immediately eliminate. I'll be back after I've read the first 2 chapters of these. All right, I'm back, and wow, that was interesting. So, first thing I realized is, yeah, I was thinking I was going to read the first chapter of each book. And then as soon as I sat down, I realized, Nicole, you didn't check to see how long these chapters are. And if I have any hope of getting through all of these today, which I do, that's not going to work. So I decided that I'd read the first chapter, or at least enough to get a sense of the author's writing style and where the book is going. So I'll start by talking about Robert Penn Warren's All the King's Men. This book is described as one of the finest novels ever written on American politics. Set in the 1930s, it traces the rise and fall of Willie Stark, who resembles the real-life Huey Kingfish Long of Louisiana. And it basically follows this guy's political career, which he starts out as really being sort of a hero for the people type of politician, and eventually goes downhill and becomes very corrupt. So I started the first chapter, and oh boy, that first sentence I already knew. I was not going to like this writing style. I tend to be more on the Hemingway side of things, where I want it short, clear, and concise. And that first sentence was one long. The first sentence in this book is almost the whole page. And it was written in such a way that I had to pause after a second and go, does my book have typos? Because it repeated itself in a weird way. It's slightly poetic, but not in a way that I enjoy. To me, this opening chapter felt like a racist man on an acid trip driving down the highway. If that's your jam, you might want to read this book. Yeah, no, it's a no for me. It's definitely like I'm not gonna read it. It's a unhaul. Like I don't need a second chance. Can I see why this won the became a Pulitzer Prize winner? In terms of the writing style, yes. In terms of the fact that it's the narrator discussing this, and I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to like the narrator, yes. And I'm sure the tolerance for calling minorities all sorts of things was much higher back then. We'll just leave it at that. So the next book I had from that very same time period or thereabouts is A Confederacy of Dunces. So A Confederacy of Dunces is considered a comic masterpiece, according to the back of my book. And the hero is Ignatius J. Riley, who is kind of like Louisiana's version of Don Quixote. This sounds like something that I would enjoy. I read the first chapter of this, which was just 28 pages, so that was fine. So it started out with Ignatius. He's a 30-year-old man. He's waiting for his mom outside a department store, and he has a run-in with the cop. This book could be viewed by some people, if you were going to read it, as being somewhat problematic in terms of Ignatius's viewpoint and probably generally all of society's viewpoints of certain people and that kind of thing. Like, the policeman originally comes over to arrest him because he's a very large, like, obese, oddly dressed guy, therefore he must be a pervert. So there's that. I feel like I'm kind of at the point where I feel like there's going to be some things in this book that I view as being problematic, and I may not find it as funny as it would have been back in the 80s. I'm not going to put a lot of effort into keeping this book, so it may be something where if I'm looking for books to unhaul and I haven't gotten to it yet, this may go. So I'm just going to go ahead and add it right now. There you go. There's your new home. That does also mean that for my TBR game, I will be adding that book to my unicorn, which if you don't know what that is, you need to go and watch. I guess it'll show up in my December TBR video. So the next books I'm going to go on, and hopefully we'll have better luck, because so far we have a DNF and at risk of being unhauled. Well, not even a DNF. We have just an unhaul. The next book that I'm going to try is The Color Purple by Alice Walker. I feel like saying I was a fan of the movie is kind of a weird thing to say because it's actually a very heartbreaking movie, but it has a lot of really interesting themes in it. So I'm hoping the same will be true of the book. I have never read the book. Um, I want to say it wasn't until maybe 10 years ago or something like that that I even knew it was a book. And I've owned the book for a little while and just haven't gotten around to it, so I'll be interested to read the first chapter of this. There is no actual chapter one in this book. I'll probably just read the first 20 odd pages in here. I think it's going to go very quickly as, the letters are pretty short. I'm also going to be reading in conjunction with that to try is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. As I mentioned, this is a reread for me, but I read it over 20 years ago. So I'm interested to read this and to reread this and to see what I think about it 20 years later. I'm not expecting that the writing style of either of these will be an issue for me. Let's go and give these two books a try. How about that? Okay, I'm back with some more information. So, one, I did a little more homework here. The Pulitzer Prize for Fiction is given for distinguished fiction by an American author, preferably dealing with an American life. Now, I believe there may have been some changes to that over the years and even more so recently. And I don't recall whether it has to do with the author side of it or if they're less concerned about whether or not it deals with American life. I know there's definitely been controversy regarding both of those definitions. I'm not going to get into any of that. I'm just concerned with the books that I'm reading. The Color Purple, I should mention, was published in 1982 and won the Pulitzer Prize in 1983. I read like the first 20 chapters or so, like I said, that were letters, and I'm definitely going to keep reading this. Like, I'm adding this to my shelf officially to be read, and will probably recommend it as a book club read for my family book club. There are a lot of potential triggers in this book. I mean, there's abuse, there's sexual assault, rape. There are just a lot of really negative relationships and hardships that these girls go through. Incest, I mean, name it, it could claim it. I'm excited about having this book on my shelf, and I look forward to getting to it eventually. Lonesome Dove was the next book. This was published in 1985 originally. And won the Pulitzer in 1986. I really like the writing style in this. I think that was why I enjoyed it the first time. I think I also liked just his description of the West and just a different lifestyle than I knew. I do think there will definitely be some problematic stereotyping of minorities, particularly Mexicans and Native Americans. I do think the author wrote them as well and as fairly as he could. But yeah, people were still largely ignorant of other races at the time. And so I won't be surprised if that comes up here. It's the Wild West, and I don't know that that excuses the behavior, but it certainly explains a lot more of it. Um, yeah, and I'll just leave it at that. So I will be reading this. This will go on my TBR for now. It'll be interesting to see when I go to read it, how I like it overall, and if I find it difficult to stick with, if it ends up feeling too slow paced. I doubt it though, but it might be something that I read slowly over time. So those are those two books on. Okay, sorry, I know the angle has changed a little bit, but I needed to change my seating situation because my leg kept falling asleep. Anyway, the next book that I have to discuss is The Known World, which I realized I didn't mention this earlier. Um, it was placed somewhere. I had taken it from my pile that I had set aside of Pulitzer Prize winners. This book was published in 2003 and won the Pulitzer in 2004. I started reading this book. You can see I have a few tabs in it. I want to say earlier this year. And then I put it down because a couple of pages into the book, there were some topics about slavery that I had never heard of before. and that I found so profound that I really wanted to talk to someone about this. I put it aside so that I could recommend it for my family book club. So that's actually the only reason that I stopped reading it. I I guess I don't really need to reread the first chapter of this. I know that I was enjoying what I read so far. I was just really interested in the topics that it was covering and wanted to bring it up to my family. So I'm not even going to bother um, rereading this right now since I read it so recently. I know that it's one that can go right back on my TBR list. Okay, so that brings us to our next two books, which would be Gilead, which was published in 2004, and March, which was published in 2005. These are the 2005 and 2006 Pulitzer Prize winners, respectively. So I guess I'll start with Gilead since that's first. Basically, what happened was I started to read this book in October. The book just didn't gripped me from the beginning, and I really didn't want to read past the first couple of pages. I will do it this time just for the sake of this video. I'll read the first 20 pages or so, just to get a sense of it and then decide. The other book is March by Geraldine Brooks. For some reason, I really confused myself, as I've mentioned multiple times, and thought these were the same authors. And so I had concluded that if I didn't like Gilead, I wasn't going to like March. I've since figured out they're not the same person. Um, so I will be reading this. I will read the first chapter, which is only it's like 7 pages. So I will read the whole first chapter of this one and then decide. I'm pretty sure that the only reason I thought I wasn't going to like this was because I thought it was the same author. So this should be a pretty quick one for me to go through. Let me go give these a try and we will see what I think when I come back. Okay, here we go. Now to the two books that I just read, some from Gilead being one of them. I started this book again, and yeah, I'm just not interested. So there's nothing wrong with the writing style. It's pretty straightforward, it's pretty simple. It kind of feels to me like a bit of contemporary fiction, but it really is just this particular book's theme. The spiritual battles, the religious themes, that kind of thing that come up in this book. They're coming up in a way and a perspective that I'm just not finding that interesting. You may like the book if you like books that discuss religious themes, issues between fathers and sons, and even grandchildren potentially. Then this may be a book that you like. It has a very strong first person narrator, so give it a try if you want. And finally, the last book that I've tried thus far is March. This book is supposed to follow the father of The Women in Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. And in the book, and also in the very beginning of this book, it comes up that the father is not present in the story because he's off fighting the war, and it's the Civil War. March is supposed to be sort of like a fictional add on, if you will, where it's telling the story of what's going on with the father. I wasn't sure how interested I would be in this book, but I do have to say, those first couple of pages of this book gripped me. It was very action heavy, very fast paced all of a sudden, and I want to know more. I want to know what's going to happen next. I want to know if he's going to survive. I mean, it's the Civil War, anything could happen. So I am now looking forward to this one. This is a definite adding to my to be read pile. Um, I didn't mention, but Gilead is definitely going to be unhauled for me. I don't even want to give it a second chance. I've tried it twice now, very close together, and both times I hate to say it, I found it boring. So the next book that I have was published in 2013, and that is The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I have heard a lot about this book thanks to BookTube. Um, I have seen it in stores and been tempted because it's a big chunky book and I like big books. So I'm excited to read this. To me, in a lot of ways, it feels reminiscent from what I've heard to A Catcher in the Rye, which one day I will talk about. Spoiler, I can't stand that book. So, in that sense, I am a little bit worried because there are some aspects of what this novel is about that reminds me of sort of like a modern retelling of The Catcher of the Rye, and I'm not sure if I'm going to like that. Anyway, so I don't forget, I'm going to tell you what this book says it's about right now. Theo Decker, a 13-year-old New Yorker, Holden Caulfield, anyone? Miraculously survives an accident that kills his mother. Abandoned by his father, Theo is taken in by a wealthy Park Avenue family. He is bewildered by his strange new home and tormented by his longing for his mother. Clings to the one thing that reminds him of her, a small, mysteriously captivating painting that has come into his possession. So, a goldfinch. Would have been interesting if it was a goldfish. So I believe there's also a movie of this now. Um, because I swear I've seen a clip of that whole moment where there's the accident that kills his mother, but I could be wrong. Anyway, I think this premise sounds very interesting. I've never read anything by Donna Tartt, so I will be interested to see what her writing style is like. Will I be able to read the whole first chapter? Which, mind you, the only reason I'm not reading the whole first chapter is because some of these first chapters are so long that it would take me multiple days just to get a sense of the book. Um, I'm already thinking I'm not going to read a whole first chapter because it looks like chapter one is in parts. So I may just read the first part. Oh, no, that's really short. 10 pages is how long a typical chapter is in a lot of books. So I'll probably read the first 10 to 20 pages, just depending on how quickly it goes. This is larger than a trade paperback, and the writing's a decent size, so I'm thinking I should get a lot of story in the first 10 pages. We'll see how that goes. I will also be reading with it The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. This book was published in 2016 and won the Pulitzer Prize in 2017. I have read Harlem Shuffle by Colson Whitehead, and we did that as a family book club read, and we all had mixed feelings about it. In some ways, it was really fascinating. In other ways, I was not a fan of the writing style. Is largely what it came down to. That was another book that it felt like an acid trip. So I haven't heard anything about that related to the Underground Railroad. I know this book, I believe, was a lot more successful than Harlem Shuffle was. So I will be really interested to read this book and to see if I like his style in this book better. Because I will also be interested in watching the TV series that was based on this book. So I'll read a little description of the Underground Railroad. Cora is a young slave on a cotton plantation in Georgia. An outcast even among her fellow Africans, she is on the cusp of womanhood where greater pain awaits. And so, when Caesar, a slave who has recently arrived from Virginia, urges her to join him on the Underground Railroad, she seizes the opportunity and escapes with him. We will see what I think about this after reading the first chapter. I can say this: if it reads like the Harlem Shuffle, I'm not sure that I'm gonna be here for it. I'm just not. Goldfinch. All right, I'm looking forward to this even more than I was before. What can I say? The opening bit that I read, which was, I don't even think I read a full 10 pages, maybe 5, 7 pages, really caught me. The writing style, what was really doing it. I definitely think it's going to be a slow-paced book. Certainly a character story following this young man's life, but her writing is just beautiful. Very touching what she discusses in these opening couple of pages. He's really just talking about his mother and his memories of his mother, and it's just in such a profound way. I mean, it's a tribute to mothers. I just thought it was beautiful. Ironically, like in Gilead, this has that trope of the unknown, that sort of things have happened that I'm going to allude to, and I'm going to heavily foreshadow, but kind of not reveal parts of my life yet. But the way she wrote it does not bother me. I think it's because it's not as heavy hitting in some ways as in Gilead. And also, I just like her writing style better. So there's that. Okay, The Underground Railroad. This was very much a contrast. I'd say Colson Whitehead, his writing style is just much more straightforward and clean. I didn't find it as beautiful, especially back to back with Donna Tartt. However, this was a really interesting opening to a book, starting in Africa and then coming over on the slave ships and starting to move into, the next generation. I think this is going to be a pretty succinct novel. I think it's going to be hard hitting and probably very difficult at times. Interestingly, I'm noticing that there's a lot of books about slavery on this Pulitzer Prize list, but they're coming much more in the later years. So to me, when I think about the fact that the Pulitzer is supposed to be by American authors, preferably about American life, it's good to see that at some point in the Pulitzer Prize history, they started talking about the lives of non white Americans. I know they do in earlier prizes as well, but specifically getting into the issues of slavery. I think if you're an American, that is part of American life. I don't think that's the only part of American life. And I think you see that in some of the other books that are on even my bookshelf here that are Pulitzer Prize winners. So this will be an interesting read, but it's definitely going to be a difficult read and probably one that I will recommend again for my family book club. Okay, I have my last two books to try, and then we're going to wrap it up for now. The light has been weird in here the whole time, and it's just getting weirder. So let me stop while I'm ahead. So the next book that I have, The Night Watchman, published in 2020. It was the 2021 Pulitzer Prize winner, so we're very close up to the present now. Um, these books came out, well, just 2 years later than The Night Watchman for this one. So I guess I'll start with The Overstory by Richard Powers. I picked this up just a couple of weeks ago. It was on my TBR list and I thought I was going to read it. I ended up DNFing this because I liked his writing style in general. I thought the writing read very smoothly. I guess in the end, I just didn't feel like there was anything driving the narrative. And that said, I found the book to be all narrative. It really was a third person narration, and almost the entire story was just the narration of what was going on. There was very minimal dialogue other than to describe a few interactions between people, and a lot of the book just had to do with the overstory, the story, the narration that was going on overall. And thanks to reading this book and Blonde by Joyce Carol Oates back to back, I realized that I do not like books that are narration heavy, where virtually the whole book is just narrating events. I like good prose, I like good dialogue, and this just wasn't doing it for me. To me, it just wasn't interesting enough. I could tell I was going to struggle through the book. I felt like I was going to have to combine it with an audiobook just to get through it, and that it was going to end up being kind of a slog. But if you like books that are really heavy on the narration side and follow basically a central character, though it may not be the one that you expect, then you might really enjoy this book. Like, I can appreciate it for what it is. It's just not a book for me. This will go to be unhauled. That brings me to my last book, which is The Night Watchman. So I'm going to go and I'm going to read a few pages of this, maybe the first chapter. We'll see. We know how that's been going. Oh, the first chapter is a flash in the pan. So maybe the first few chapters, the first 10 pages or so. Okay, can we just decide on that? Give up on the chapter idea. Forget the try a chapter. That's way too long. I'm trying the first 10 pages. So here we go, and I'll let you know how it is when I get back. Last one. I, I don't know. I don't know. How about that? So, what is The Night Watchman about? Thomas Washash is the night watchman at the jewel-bearing plant near the Turtle Mountain Reservation in rural North Dakota. He is also a Chippewa council member who is trying to understand the consequences of a new emancipation bill in the United States. It is 1953, and he and other council members know the bill isn't about freedom. It is a termination that threatens the rights of Native Americans to their land and their very identity. So the premise of this book sounds very fascinating. There's a quick opening preface to this by Louise Erdrich. Erdrich, really hard time saying her last name. And in that, she mentions how, this is based on a true story that happened basically with, I believe it was her grandfather, who the character of Thomas is based on, and that there's him and I guess one of the council members of this book are both based on real people in life and the situation that her tribe actually went through, which I find that very fascinating. I'd really like to learn more about this, and I had never heard of this termination bill. Again, I can see how this is a part of American history. This is a part of American life. What happened with the Native American tribes and how they became not tribes, if you will. So I'm very fascinated by this story. However, the opening bit that I read was more than just slow. Yeah, it was also kind of not interesting. It's a real slow burn of the buildup of an exposition for a story. I don't want to give up on this book so quickly, but I really think it's going to be hard for me to get into it, and I'm not sure if it is a book that I'm going to stay with. So it's actually going to go over there on my at risk of being unhauled card. Go right there next to A Confederacy of Dunces. That's it for me. So what did I learn? Well, let's see. I have three books that I'm unhauling. Unlike what I thought, all from very different time periods. So it will be All the King's Men, The Overstory, and Gilead. So thus far, based on the three that I'm unhauling, I would say if I'm having an issue with Pulitzer Prizes, that maybe it's just the ones that I'm picking are sometimes themes in American life that aren't that captivating to me, and or sometimes the writing style, and also maybe the age of the book and the viewpoints. So I don't know that I would say that's connected to the Pulitzer Prize itself, but it's probably something that I need to watch out for and be aware of. So that's what I learned from the books that I'm unhauling. Next, we can talk about the books that I feel unsure about. And those would include The Night Watchman and A Confederacy of Dunces. They just weren't that fast to pick up. So, again, I don't think that's a Pulitzer Prize thing, though the Pulitzer Prize, I would say, maybe does lend mostly towards slower paced novels. So if that's not something you enjoy, you might want to keep an eye on that when picking them. So again, I don't know that I would attribute what I don't like about these books to the Pulitzer Prize. I'd probably attribute it more to just personal taste. Um, yeah. This is the set of books that are Pulitzer Prize winners that I am still really interested in reading, and in some cases very excited to pick up and read. So that would include The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead, Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, The Known World by Edward P. Jones, March by Geraldine Brooks, and The Color Purple by Alice Walker. These all hit on, I think I've discussed, aspects of American life that I find very interesting, whether it's slavery, which is three of these books, just a different perspective on an American classic, which would be March, a part of American life that I know very little about, which would be a Western, or just a general theme that I could relate to, a son's love for his mother, or just love of mothers in general. I think all of these books fall into a writing style that I really enjoy, some more than others. I have six that I am still looking forward to reading, three that I'm looking to unhaul, and two that I'm feeling iffy about. I think overall, thus far, I've learned that, and maybe this is obvious, right? Is that just because a book wins a prize doesn't mean that you're going to like the book. That may be different for some people. Some people, they may be hitting that sweet spot for you, and you may love everything that they put out. You may want to read all of the Pulitzer Prizes just because they are talking about aspects of American life, or because they are all written by American authors. I think I'm going to continue choosing my books how I've chosen them, which is not based on whether or not they've won the Pulitzer Prize. I think what I have learned from doing this, though, is that I am very particular about writing style. That is something that can either make or break a book for me, and that it would serve me well to read at least the first 5 to 10 pages of a book before, certainly before buying it, but maybe even before checking it out from the library. I think another thing that I learned is also that theme is really important to me. So if a book is on themes that I'm not a big fan of, I'm probably not going to enjoy it and want to keep reading it. This has been a really interesting experiment. I'm hoping to see some of these books come up in my TBR, but since I pick at random, I don't know when that will be happening. Like, subscribe, ring the bell so you'll be notified when I come out with more videos, and you'll at least know that you'll have these to look forward to in the future and other videos as I continue to talk about the Pulitzer Prize winners and my thoughts on them, particularly the ones that I've read, and maybe even some of the ones that I haven't read yet. If you've read any Pulitzer Prize winning novels and you've found them noteworthy and worth mentioning, please comment below. Share them so that the rest of us can look into them. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it so that other people can also see it. All right, thanks and have a good week.